Hey guys, welcome back to another video in this Flutter game development series where we are creating Spacescape, a 2D top-down space shooter using Flame Engine. In the last video, we added some nice particle effects for thruster and enemy explosion. And in this video, we are going to add a basic score and health system. So let's get started. To display score and health of player in the game world, we'll need to use the text component from Flame Engine. For this, I'll go to the Spacescape game class, and here I'll add two text components, one for player score and another for player health. Next, in the onload method of this class, let's initialize both these components at the end. So for player score, the initial text will be score:0, because when the game will start, score will be 0. I want to place the score text at top left corner, and for this we can use the position property. I'll set it to vector2 of 10,10 so that we get some margin from left and top borders. And as the default anchor point of components is top left, this will place the top left corner of this component at 10,10. Then next, to customize how the text looks, we can use the config property. This needs an object of text config. So here, we'll set the color to colors.white and font size to 16. And finally, I'll add this component to game instance component list. Similar to this, let's initialize a text component for player health too. So the initial text for this will be health:100%. Next, I want the player's health to appear on the top right corner of the screen. This can be achieved by placing the top right corner of this text component at the top right corner of the screen with some margin. So I'll set the position of this component to vector2 of size.x minus 10, 10. Here, size is the current size of screen. And to make sure that the top right corner is placed at the given position, I'll set the anchor point of this component to anchor.topRight. And at last, let's add this player health component to the components list of this game. Now let's try to build and run this to see if it works properly. And as you can see, we now have the player score component at the top left corner and player health component at the top right corner. So next, let's see how to actually keep track of score and health values, and then update them in the corresponding text components. As both the properties are related to player component, let's go to the player class and add two integers to store score and health. For now, I am keeping them public so that we can access and modify them from other components. But in the next video, I'll make some modifications to restrict the access to these fields. So once we have these fields, let's go to the onCollision method of this class. Here, we want to reduce the player's health when it hits an enemy. So inside this if check, I'll reduce the player health by 10. And to make sure that the health does not become negative, I'll clamp it to 0 if it is less than 0. Now, similar to this, we'll also have to increase the player score when an enemy is destroyed by bullet. For this, I'll go to the onCollision method of enemy class. Here, after marking current enemy to get removed, we can get a reference to player component from GameRef. But to do that, we first need to make the player field in game class public. I don't really like having this as a public field, but as I said, we'll be making some changes in the next video which will allow us to keep this field private and still modify player score from enemy component. So back in onCollision method of enemy class, I'll get player score from gameref.player.score and increase it by 1. Now that we have added code at appropriate places to update player score and health, let's see how to update these values on the screen. For this, I'll go to the game.dart file. Here, let's override the update method. This method will get called for every frame of the game. So to update the score, I'll set playerscore.text to a new string with current value of score from player.score. Similarly, I'll update the health component with player.health. Also, back in onCollision method of enemy class, I'll modify this if condition to check for collision with player component too. This will make sure that when player collides with an enemy, the enemy gets destroyed, increasing the player score by 1 and decreasing its health by 10. Now let's build and run this to see if it works. Okay, as you can see, when the bullet hits an enemy, the score gets increased by 1. And when an enemy collides with player component, the health gets reduced by 10. So this is working fine, but it will be much better if the player health is displayed as a health bar. And to create a simple health bar, I'll override the render method in this class. Here, to draw a rectangle, we can use the canvas.drawrect method. This method needs an object of rect and an object of paint. So for rect, I'll use the rect.fromLTWH. Here, first two arguments are the x and y coordinates of top left corner of the rectangle, and the next two arguments are for width and height of the rectangle. So for the x and y coordinates, I'll specify size.x minus 100 and 10. And for width and height, I'll use 100 and 10. For the paint object, let's provide a new paint object with color set to blue. If I save this, you can see that we are getting a bar at the top right corner. So I'll adjust the values of y coordinate and height of the rectangle so that it covers the health component text. And to have some margin on the right, I'll change this to 110. Next, to indicate the percentage of health left, we can change the width of rectangle depending on the player's health value. As both of them can have a maximum value of 100, I can directly use player.health as the width of this rectangle. And as this is an integer, I'll call toDouble to convert it to a double value. Now let's save this and do a hot restart to see if width of the rectangle changes when player's health reduces. And yes, as you can see, the width does get reduced correctly when player hits an enemy. Now before we end this video, I'll add a camera shake effect when player hits enemy. This will give players a better feedback that they should avoid direct contact with enemies. For this, let's go to the player.dart file. Here in the onCollision method, if the other entity is an enemy, we want to shake the camera. And to do that, we can use the built-in shake method on the default camera that we get from GameRef. As our game world is pretty simple, I didn't go much into the camera topic. But for games where the game world is much larger, cameras play an important role. Basically, a camera allows you to display only a certain part of the game world on the screen. In such cases, you might want to set up a custom camera. But in our case, the default camera is good enough. So if I save this and let an enemy collide with player, you can see that we get a very strong shake effect. So the way this works is, Flame Engine displaces the camera component by random values within a predefined max amplitude for a small amount of time. And as the camera moves, we get the shake effect. It's kind of similar to how a real life camera would behave if it is shaken while recording. And if you want, you can modify the predefined shake intensity and time of shake. So to do this, I'll go to the game.dart file. Here in the onload method, at the very end, I'll set this.camera.shakeIntensity to 20. Now let's save this and see how it looks in the game. Okay, this looks good enough. You might have noticed that when the camera shakes, the score and health components also move with it. If you want, you can stop that. So to make any component's position completely static with the screen, you can set their isHUD property to true. I'll quickly set isHUD to true for both player score and player health component. And if I save this and try to collide with enemies, you can see that now these components remain static even when the camera is shaking. So that was it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. If you did, do hit that like button and maybe consider subscribing for more such content. I hope to see you in the next one.